histories are the most widely known source that tells the story of the Greco-Persian Wars. When discussing the Persian version of the events that took place during Xerxes' Greek campaign between 480 and 479 BCE, it is difficult to ignore the impact that this work has had on the perception of Xerxes, especially when there are no sources from the ancient Persians themselves that discuss this war and the frontiers of their empire. In Book 7 of Histories, Herodotus tells us that when Xerxes became king, it was not his plan to make war on Greece, but instead with Egypt, to take revenge for their revolt against his father. But he was persuaded by Mardonius, son of Gobryas, to take revenge on the Greeks for the Persian defeat at Marathon. Historians have shown the problems with Herodotus, especially his depictions of Xerxes while at a council after newly becoming king. It has been shown that Herodotus has used creative liberties to portray Xerxes as an anti-Greek villain, a tyrant whose purpose is to destroy the homeland of democracy. Due to this, it is important to put forward a Persian version of Xerxes as a new king, and to think about why he started his campaign against the Greeks. When looking at the Persian version of the new king and his decision to invade Greece, it is important to look into different areas while acknowledging that there is no definitive answer from the Persians themselves. There could be truth in having to be persuaded to invade Greece by his advisors as shown in the histories, as it would make sense logistically to combat Egypt first, as they are rich in items like grain, and the area of Greece does not really provide anything to them they do not already have, and it is so far from the heart of Persia. So what other reasons are there for him to invade? In several inscriptions, such as at Persepolis and Susa, Xerxes shows how he is following his father and is really trying to tie himself and his rule to that of Darius. As Darius had failed in Greece, by restarting this campaign, it could be trying to fix this failure and trying to confirm what else is said in inscriptions and propaganda, that Xerxes is the king of kings and the king of all nations.
Upon his death, his son Xerxes ascended to the Persian throne and became the new ruler of the Achaemenid dynasty. As the new Persian monarch, Xerxes wanted to accomplish what his father had failed to achieve and decided to plan an enormous invasion of Greece, which started the Greco-Persian Wars. Xerxes spent several years planning the invasion of Greece, and it is stated in Persian inscription that over 3 million soldiers and mercenaries accompanied him on his campaign of Greece. However, these numbers are greatly exaggerated, and the real figure can be estimated at around 200,000 soldiers. The invasion force, comprised of both land and naval force, was set on conquering the 3 city-states of Greece and further expansion of the empire. Conquering Greece would become a major military achievement for the newly crowned king. His father, Darius the Great, had previously failed to subjugate the 3 city-states of Greece and was defeated at the Battle of Marathon. If successful, the capture of Greece would further expand his empire, and he would be unchallenged in the Mediterranean. However, Xerxes became too ambitious with his conquest of Greece. He underestimated the Greek force and the capabilities of the Spartans in particular. He first met a small resistance of 300 Spartans accompanied with 7,000 free Greeks at the Battle of Thermopylae, which proved their ability to hold off a Persian advance. This ambition would become his downfall, as the Greeks finally united and a coalition between 3 city-states formed in the defense of Greece. This coalition would prove victorious, managing to defeat Xerxes despite being greatly outnumbered. While the Greeks were successful in defending their homeland from foreign invaders, many question what could have happened if the Persians were successful in their conquest of Greece. The Greeks had a notable reputation of being an ultimate fighting force, fearless warriors that were able to beat the Persian army despite their overwhelming odds. If the Persians managed to conquer Greece, they would be able to use the Greek warriors and expand further into Western Europe.
BC between the Persians and the Spartan forces led by Leonidas at the mountainous pass of Thermopylae in central Greece. The battle is infamously known for the bravery and persistence of Leonidas and his men, despite facing a betrayal at the hands of Ephialtes, and their army significantly dwarfing that of the Persians. Modern historians estimate that the size of the Greek military strength numbered to around 7,000, and the Persians to 250,000 to 500,000. The extent of Xerxes' army is often highly exaggerated by ancient Greek historians and poets. There are no surviving Persian accounts of the battle, with primary sources being Greek, and therefore biased in order for the Greeks to portray themselves in heroic light. Herodotus claimed the size of the Persian army at Thermopylae were in the millions, and were from the reaches of Africa and Asia. Naturally, a gross exaggeration in order to show Leonidas and his men as legendary hero-like figures showing persistence in the face of betrayal and impossible odds, and the Persians as this dangerous and exotic other force from the east who had come to conquer. Whilst the outcome of the Battle of Thermopylae was a decisive victory for the Persians, it wasn't particularly notable from a militaristic view. Despite this, however, there is no doubt of the impact that the Battle of Thermopylae has had on history and modern media. The lack of Persian sources from the time period and the surplus of Greek accounts leads to a one-sided interpretation of the battle. Greek scholars and poets alike have been shown to greatly hyperbolize the heroisms of Leonidas and his Spartan soldiers. The act of Leonidas and his 300 Spartans fighting to their deaths has been the subject of art and media. In both ancient and modern, perhaps the most iconic modern interpretation of the Battle of Thermopylae is the 2007 Zack Snyder's 300. Xerxes is presented as an effeminate supernatural god-king hell-bent on conquering Greece to expand his empire, whilst portraying Leonidas and his men as the heroes. The film has a number of subplots which have no reflection on real-life historical accuracy, which is pretty apt considering the movie was based on Frank Miller's graphic novel rather than Herodotus' account. Whether intentional or not, Snyder plays into the Greek portrayal of the Persians, effeminate, barbaric individuals whose society was far beneath that of the Greeks. One iconic example of this view is seen as the Eurymedon vase as shown.
The Battle of Salamis is considered to be a turning point in the Greco-Persian conflict of 480 BC. No Persian accounts of the conflict exist, and most of the narrative from the battle is taken from Greek sources, predominantly Herodotus' histories and later Aeschylus' Persians. Thus, without direct Persian sources in the battle, inscriptions at Persepolis and events prior and following the battle must be used to create an idea of what Xerxes' thoughts must have been. Salamis, despite Greek representations, was not the end for the Persians, as Xerxes left Mardonius, a trusted general, to continue the conflict. With himself retreating and continuing to direct his forces from Sardis, it can therefore be inferred that he was not completely broken after the conflict. It can be argued further that Xerxes still remained confident and strong following the battle, as despite Greek sources claiming he fled through hostile lands with a broken army, multiple Greek states remained loyal to the Persians and did not turn on the king. XPH3 highlights the many peoples that have been put under Xerxes' rule through the will of Ahura Mazda. It includes Ionians that dwell across the sea, presumably being the Greeks. This implies that despite Greek sources stating that at Salamis Persian power had been broken and washed away, with Xerxes himself taking a disorderly flight, Xerxes considered his achievements in Greece as justification enough to view himself as their subjugator, making Salamis not appear as much of a setback for him. XPH4 adds that a state existed which Xerxes, through the aid of Ahura Mazda, smote down and destroyed, possibly referring to the sacking of Athens. The destruction of Athens seems to take a much greater precedent over other events such as the Battle of Salamis during the campaign, and can be argued as a primary goal for Xerxes, with him achieving vengeance for his father's loss at Marathon and the sacking of Sardis by the Greeks prior. Overall, it is difficult to exactly know the thoughts of Xerxes during this part of his campaign, but from the inscriptions used and other events, it is possible to glean a small understanding of how Xerxes at least thought of his own image when it came to Salamis and Greece as a whole.
So what would have happened if Xerxes' Greece campaign was successful? Firstly, it can be argued that a Pax Persiana would have been implemented within a time of political and social unrest within Greece. Pax Persiana refers to the period of peace within the Achaemenid Empire following the lengthy military excursions of Xerxes' army. As scholar Goldwag states, Greece was rife with spasmodic acts of political unrest, so if Xerxes was successful, perhaps this Persian peace would have been implemented to help settle Hellenistic unrest and invasions. Furthermore, if Xerxes was successful, the Achaemenid Empire would have had an unmatched military strength. Both Greek and Persian forces would have banded together to create a multinational force arrayed under imperial rule. The size of the new army would have protected Xerxes' position from the top of Europe to the bottom of the Asia Minor. Lastly, the empire would have expanded massively, with the Achaemenid Empire having an advanced system of roads, currency, and taxation. A Persian version of life in Greece would have been a positive cultural diffusion and exchange, scholars argue. Therefore, this new expanded empire would have bolstered Xerxes' position as king and would have allowed his monarchical influence to be widespread within the ancient world. Here is some archaeological evidence of Persian and Greek military armour, vases, and propagandist reliefs. If you're feeling brave, take our quiz covering topics mentioned in today's PowerPoint. Here is a bibliography from where all of our information was gathered.